love me so much more than I could ever know. Be the same, never be the same. Whoa, 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 I will never be the same, never be the same ever again. Well, here I am waiting, Lord, my life is just for you. Please unfold all the plans that you would have me do. And if all the world's just a breath and nothing's here to stay, then all of the love we feel will save us anyway. And I will never be the same, never be the same. Whoa, I will never be the same, never be the same ever again. Never be the same.
Hello and welcome to SDAQ&A. Good to have you back. What a big week it's been already. Yesterday we chatted with Dr. Alan Davis, formerly of Amazing Facts. He was the vice president over there for a while, and it was really interesting to chat with him. Right now we're going to delve back into the archives and play another program from our seminal, is that the right word, series on Des Ford Glacier View. At the time, it was the 40th anniversary of Glacier View, and Facebook are deleting all live videos on Facebook, and as that series was only available in our private group, I thought it was high time to get it out here, both on Facebook and YouTube. And that way it's in the public forum and will hopefully be here for many to observe and enjoy and get into for many years to come. Now, I invited Dr. Iris Yob to join me today. I had an email reply and I only let her know a couple of days ago, so it's not her fault. But hopefully, she might suddenly go, "Hey, yeah, I can do that," and join us to watch this episode. I really enjoyed it. I have a few memories of the conversation, but instead of going on, I'm just going to play it. So, welcome everybody. Good to have you here. Don't forget that we're going to go straight to book club right after the interview. So, yeah, if you can hang around for that, Rochelle Anonymous will be leading out and reading Whitewashed by Sydney Cleveland. And it's a fantastic read. Okay, let's see. Oh, and Jennifer Colburn is taking our gospel message this week, Thursday, 6 p.m. Pacific time in California, and then work it out across the country, and then here in Australia at 11 a.m. Okay, without further ado, let's get into this interview. Season 2, Episode 12, Glacier View and Des Ford. And this was in 2020. But I'll tell you what, it's as fresh to watch now as it was back then, because a lot of the issues haven't even been touched upon. Definitely not addressed by leadership in the Adventist Church. And anyway, here it is. Or a system is saying to you, you shouldn't be talking about this, then I think those that are interested should be making an extra effort to look into it. And I think there's been a lot of effort to suppress talk about Des Ford, Glacier View. And so I think that in itself makes it a valuable topic to search and discuss. So sometimes I find myself more interested in talking about things because they're not allowed to be talked about. In fact, I was involved with restoring the complete 1959 sermon series, which was on tape, of Pastor Burnside's Tivoli Theatre series that he did in 1959 in Christchurch at the Tivoli Theatre. And I didn't agree with the content, but I really wanted to get his voice heard. And again, and in many ways, that's what I'm doing now too. Anyway, that's the long reveal on my epiphany, and it's probably not that big a thing. So let's begin. Short pause so I can edit this later. Hello everyone, and welcome to SDAQ&A. I'm Peter Dixon, your host for today, and I'm joined by Dr. Iris Yob. Hi Iris.
Hi.
It's so good to have you here. Thank you for agreeing to chat with me today.
No, thank you for having this at 10 o'clock in the morning, which at least means 8 o'clock at night for me, which is okay.
It was a nice
And
balance.
by the way, it's still Wednesday here.
That's right.
And so you're already into Thursday. Is there anything terrible happening on Thursday that I should know about?
I'm from your future.
Yes.
Well, I can tell you that the New York Stock Exchange opened nice and high, so you might want to buy some shares before tomorrow morning. And where are you actually chatting to us from?
I'm in Yarmouth Port, which is on Cape Cod, Massachusetts, USA.
It's gone a little bit quiet there. Is there a button that you've pressed at all? Or?
No, I didn't. Is this
No?
better?
Yeah, that's a bit better. It might just be the bandwidth or something. Yeah. So in Massachusetts.
Indeed. Yes.
And are you? Is there any kind of writing and around you at all, or that's quite a long way away? That's in Minnesota, is it?
It's in Massachusetts. We're probably about 60 miles from Boston. There's been a bit of trouble up there. My university is located in Minneapolis, which is just the sweetest, most liberal city. So this is all kind of shocking. But
Mm.
here on Cape Cod, it's very quiet, very calm. And what's nice is to be in the whole New England area, which is probably the most liberal area in the US.
Right. It's a beautiful area too, isn't it?
It's very, very lovely.
Yeah.
Yeah. And of course,
Now,
it's spring and everything is just fantastic. Just so,
yes,
so photographic.
yes, I've seen beautiful pictures of this time of year from that part of the world. I like to try and link in where I can with a memory I have of connections with people that I've interviewed, and you actually have a very important part of my I guess a turning point was how I kind of thought about things. I was just, yeah, in a good way. You were lecturing me. I can't even remember what subject it was. You might remember. Um, and one day you said, we're going to talk about humanism today, and I'm going to play you a song that typifies or demonstrates the narrative of humanism in a nutshell. And I thought, oh, that's my ears perked up because I'm a musician. And you started playing John Lennon's Imagine. And even though I thought I was quite a well-versed musician, I actually hadn't heard that song. Adventism had sheltered me a fair bit. And I was just absorbed and stunned by the lyrics. Imagine there's no heaven, there's no countries, there's no war, that kind of thing. And it became a pivotal memory for me because it made me continue to ask questions and explore the possibilities outside of the fences that had been put around me. It expanded my mind quite explosively just in that one moment. And I've always remembered that, and thank you for doing that. Um, do you remember?
I,
Do you remember playing the song? Was it something you did each year to the students?
no, I don't think I did, but I do remember doing it on that occasion. And I remember too handling the discussion very poorly
Oh, really?
because I was still kind of steeped in the traditional. I think I would do a better job of it now. Maybe we ought to have a discussion sometime.
Yes, I'd be very interested because it's interesting. I don't. It opened my mind. It didn't make me think we don't have to have a heaven and we don't have to have no borders, and it didn't make me go, oh, good, I'm going to be total left wing social democrat. Socialist John Lennon, but it just made me think about thinking, and it made me imagine how things could be different and how I didn't have to think a certain way just because people said I did.
Yeah.
And so it was that and another conversation I'd had with Dr. Eric Magnuson, who was my neighbour at the time, and that couple of things really got me thinking as a young person. So tell us a little bit about your experience with Avondale. Were you a student there as well, and how did you become a lecturer there? Tell us a bit about that, and then we're going to jump into some Glacier View stuff.
Okay. So I went and did my primary teaching certificate at Avondale after I left. Well, I left high school and did 2 years of junior teaching in Melbourne to get enough money to pay my college fees. Then I went to Avondale and did my 2 years there. Wonderful, fantastic years. I taught for a couple of years, went to the Mildura School and taught at Lilydale. Then I got a call back to come to Avondale to teach at the high school. And
What year was
again,
that?
fabulous years. And while I was teaching there, Trevor Lloyd came and saw me, and he said, we were going to employ this person. I remember his name. His name was David Stokes.
Oh,
But David had pulled out. And so they were short a lecturer. And so I was invited to join the faculty.
so what year was that?
That would have been, gosh, early 70s.
Okay.
I don't remember exactly. Yeah.
I know that Dr. Trevor Lloyd is watching these interviews, so you might want to give him a
Great.
shout out.
Hi, Trevor. Well,
He's
that kind of set me on a road because, I had my primary teaching certificate, and then I was called to teach in high school. So while I was teaching in high school, I went to Newcastle and got my bachelor's degree, so I was qualified to do that. Just finished getting my bachelor's degree and was invited to teach at the college. So Trevor said I had to go. Happily I went to Newcastle to get my master's degree. And then I also realised I needed to get more qualifications, especially as we added graduate work at Avondale. So that's when I wanted to do my doctoral studies. So always my career was running ahead of my qualifications.
Yeah, okay. It's good that you didn't balk at it, though. A lot of people were like, yeah, we'll do that later, and you seem to kind of embrace it.
I loved it.
So what was your thesis on that was it your first PhD?
Yeah, I've only got
Oh,
one.
I only got one.
Only put myself
That's
through
enough.
that.
That's enough.
I do have a couple of master's degree, but only one doctoral degree. It was on how we make meaning as human beings. And I was particularly interested in the non-discursive languages, the languages without literal words. So I was interested in how music, art, the natural world, myth, metaphor, non-literal languages all play a part in helping us to make meaning.
Right.
And it all very closely paralleled my religious and spiritual journey as well.
In a sense of how you embrace the arts within a religious framework, you mean?
No, more within the spiritual framework.
Okay.
Like, we're now walking into Glacier View. I want to be careful how I say this because I found the gospel message from Des absolutely wonderful and spiritual and uplifting. I found the squabbling and the fighting and the nastiness the opposite. And when I left Avondale to come to the US to do my doctoral work, I felt there was a lack. I felt like my feet had been bogged down in the literal interpretation of scriptures one way or the other. And while it was inspiring, there was something for me that was lacking. It wasn't reaching my heart as much as my head. And I wanted to know, I felt like I wasn't necessarily in touch with the divine. I wasn't in tune with that so much. I had a lot of questions. I remember when I was at high school, I went to the the Hawthorne Adventist School in Melbourne, and a group of us were very self-righteous, and we thought we'd do a little Bible study at lunchtime. So we thought we'd start off with something easy like the Book of Revelation. Well, we couldn't even get through the first chapter without, not understanding a word of what this all meant.
Yeah.
And I thought, here we are, the church has been squabbling with us about the literal interpretation of books like Daniel and Revelation, which kind of defy literal interpretation. All kinds of proof texts were being pushed out, and we were supposed to believe that this meant that, and the book applied to our time. And what about all the centuries that had gone before us? Were these books irrelevant? I mean, it
Mm,
just raised so many questions.
mm,
So I was interested in, how do we get in touch with the divine? And of course, the Bible is full of myths and metaphors and images. The Lord is my shepherd. Those Isaiah 40, my favorite chapter in the scriptures. What a wonderful chapter that is. You gather on the wings of eagle. You will run and not be weary. You will walk and not faint.
mm,
Fabulous, moving stuff
mm,
that kind of really did reach the heart. So, and I wondered how much we could build meaning without having to use all these literal interpretations of everything.
mm.
That always raised more questions than answers anyway.
And that's a good thing. And in some ways, when you played that song in class, you were kind of touching on that as well, because I would have called that a spiritual experience for me.
Yes,
And it
yes,
raised questions and continues to raise questions for me.
yes,
And I,
yes,
I
yes.
no longer really seek the answers, but I enjoy the experience. And I think one of the things John Rosier said the other night when he was talking about Des, and also Kenneth Samples, who was a protege of Walter Martin, he said that the way Des kind of spoke about the gospel was just so beautiful. It gave them an emotional and spiritual experience. And I've often said in these interviews, imagine if Des had stayed within Adventism, that beautiful gift of bringing that joy and that sense of wonder about the Gospels into the church. It would have been a wonderful thing.
I
And so,
remember Trevor Lloyd saying once that Des was in all kinds of trouble for what he was saying about the sanctuary and what it all meant. And he said, well, what he's doing is trying to lift our eyes off the furniture.
yeah,
as,
wow.
only, as only Trevor can. But I
That,
remember that and I thought, absolutely,
yeah,
absolutely.
that is so well said.
There's a wonderful story that has influenced me, I think, and perhaps in some ways described my own journey metaphorically. I'm not going to get this story exactly correct because the original has all kind of wonderful names and places in it. But it goes something like this. The people realized that they were surrounded by a threatening force. The Philistines were upon them, so they thought they needed help. They ran to the sacred grove, took the fire and put it on the sacred altar, prayed the sacred prayer, and God heard them, and it was sufficient, and he saved them. But
Wow.
then a
Yeah.
few generations go by.
Yeah.
You can see how the story's going to go. A few generations, the Philistines gather again around them, and again they flee to the sacred grove, to the sacred altar, but they've lost the sacred fire. But they do remember the sacred prayer, so they pray that, and it is sufficient. God saves them again. So a couple more generations go by. The Philistines come again, and again they want to flee, but the sacred grove is long gone. The altar has disappeared. They have no fire, sacred fire, but they remember the prayer. So they pray the prayer, and it is sufficient. God hears them and saves them again. Well, another generation or two passes by, and again the Philistines gather. Well, the people didn't have the sacred grove or the sacred altar. They didn't have the fire. They'd forgotten the prayer. But they remembered the story, and it was sufficient, and the people were saved. And I think, sometimes we get so tied up in the literal stuff.
Yeah, I just got
Forget the
goosebumps listening
story.
to that.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
mean, I got goosebumps when I first read it. And I
Yeah.
think that pretty well sums up what
Yes.
I've been working on and thinking about and
Yeah.
experiencing over these last years.
That is fabulous. And I think that again is one of the reasons we should talk about these things, because if people try and stop you even knowing the story, you
Yeah.
don't have access to that redemption.
Yep. Yep.
Wow, that's beautiful.
It's in the story and the meaning of the story that's
Yes,
important.
yes, yes. Um, so to Glacier View, and again, I'm not putting myself into the context, but it it's it's something that by 1981, I think that would have been the year you were lecturing me. It's only a year before August, so maybe only 6 months before the Glacier View thing had happened. My generation were totally oblivious to it. The story had been suppressed, so much so that on campus it was never talked about. We had, I remember a stream of evangelistic American speakers coming through in 81, right up to 84. 85, and it was just positive Adventist stuff, positive, and oh, Ellen White, what a wonderful little lady she was, and they'd tell these stories. The lecturers were probably too scared to talk about it, maybe at that time. Ministers had left, as was revealed recently, about 180 ministers left. So I'm just putting into context that my generation didn't know, and the reason I'm putting myself back into that 1981 is I want to know what you were thinking at that time. You've come to lecture these kids. We're there with our fresh, open minds, and going through your mind is I want to impart what you've just said, this ability to express spiritual, divine connection in an academic way. But you've also just 6 months earlier possibly had this profound ouch moment. What was going through your head as you entered into that year of lecturing in 1981?
I think deep down I was feeling bereft. I believed in Adventist education. I believed in what we were trying to do. I believed in restoring the image of God in people, the salvation that would come through Adventist education. So for me, I could continue to support and be enthusiastic about that. But outside of the classroom, it felt sometimes very different, except we were very, very fortunate. What a faculty we had.
Amazing.
It was supportive, it was helpful. Arthur Patrick would say something that was just absolutely so helpful at the moment. And of course, there was Trevor and Eric Magnuson. I don't want to start naming faculty. It was just absolutely fantastic. And so it was a nurturing environment. I remember when Athol Tolhurst came back from America. Now, I don't remember now whether this was from Glacier Review or from Autumn Council or some other big event, but where Des was basically defrocked. And he didn't even go home. He kind of came straight off the plane to Avondale to tell us.
Wow.
It was just horrible. Sitting in that lecture theatre at Avondale and just hearing these words, it was just like a terrible shock. And everyone sat silent except for one person, and that was his sister, Nairi Magnuson, who was sitting in the audience, and she threw some pretty humdinger questions at Athol.
Really? Do you remember what they were?
No, I can't remember. The atmosphere was kind of so charged that I don't think it was almost unspeakable.
Wow.
So I can't put into words now all that was said and done, but just the feeling of it. And we all sat there dumb. I wouldn't do that now, but I did it then. Yeah. Well, I was in education. I wasn't in theology. What would I know anyway? We did have one of our students sitting outside on the steps of the lecture theatre. You might know him.
Yeah,
we've been in touch recently. His name is Lyndon Wright.
Yeah.
Lyndon Wright.
Yeah.
And he was a great conversation partner, but he said to me afterwards, well, there were all the mushrooms sitting in the dark, all the toadstools not doing anything. And I thought, oh dear, that is so true. But I mean, there was a sense of utter powerlessness.
Yeah.
And a sense of we were just barely hanging on to our jobs.
Yeah.
And our faith.
Yeah.
Like everything was up for grabs. And nobody quite knew, well, at least me, I didn't know quite what to do with it all.
Yeah. That helps to understand that a bit better from my perspective, because we definitely felt as we came into the 90s and 2000s that the baby boomers, or that many of the liberal leaders had remained quiet through the decades beyond Glacier View, and would wheel us young people out to kind of provoke the Conservatives, and then we'd take all the flack for it. And and quietly behind the scenes, they would literally say, good on you for doing that, things are changing. And I was fine with that until recently. I've grown to resent it a bit now, especially as a lot of them are speaking up now that they're retired, and it's less of a threat for them.
Oh, that is just so annoying, isn't it? How they have these conversions as soon as they're safe and sound in retirement. I'm not impressed. Not impressed by that. Yeah. I remember the 27 fundamental, my timeline is not exactly sure now, but it was before I left for the US, and I left in 83. So, within a short time of that, out came the 27 fundamentals. And they were supposed to be shared with all of the institutions. Well, Eric Magnuson bravely called us together. We went through them. It took 27 nights.
Really?
We went through one a night. Yeah. And we just sat in one of the classrooms in the White Building. The invitation was for everybody, but maybe 6 of us went, which is really quite in now I think back. That was interesting. And, I remember John Cox was there, probably Arthur and some of the others. But that was a very nurturing and supportive discussion as well. Where, what was good about it, where its strengths were, where the problem is. Wonderful open discussion, but there were no students involved.
Yeah. I was lucky in that, Dad had been a lecturer there at Avondale, and
Right.
and we lived on the hill there. We used to call it there near the water tower. And so I grew up with all the kids of the lecturers, and we remained friends. And so we would have trickle down conversations, oh, Dad said this last night. And oh, really? What did your mum and dad say about that? And what does Dr. Lindsay think about that? And and then we'd get back to playing cricket or whatever we did. So I felt like we were getting a little bit of information about it, and we very much respected and the environment that that you guys did kind of create. When you first heard, did you hear the famous cassette of the forum meeting that Des had in, I think, October 27, 1979, that kind of lit the fuse to explode in Glacier View?
I'm sure I did. I mean, everybody did.
Yeah.
But I don't remember too much about its impact.
Yeah. So let's go straight to Glacier View. When did you hear about it? In a sense of realizing the ramifications, and that Des was now going to be. Was it that meeting that you heard with Athol, or was it prior to that?
It possibly was, although I think it was the defrocking meeting, and I don't know whether the two meetings were the same.
Right.
Yeah.
So what take us to your memory of?
We knew Des was preparing for it, and of course he wasn't around while he was preparing. We knew that there were high stakes. I mean, I'm talking about somebody who wasn't in the theology circle. We were in our own circle. I remember when they came back from Glacier View, bumping into Arthur Fursh, and how distraught he was at the time. We had a really good chat, which we didn't often do with the theology folks. What bothered Arthur? Arthur is one kind of thinker, and Des is another kind of thinker. Arthur is, I think, analytic, right? He would go into a lecture, I'm sure, part A, point 123, part B, point 123. I don't think Des did that.
No.
Des was kind of eclectic. I was looking after the kids one weekend, his 3 children, while he was preaching somewhere, and he left a Reader's Digest on the kitchen table, and I just happened to open it. There's it underlined and notated articles in the Reader's Digest. I mean, he would get information from anywhere. And he had this synthetic mind that he could bring all these parts together. So Arthur felt, he kind of expressed to me some concern about how the way Des presented his stuff wasn't the way he would have presented it, and he felt it didn't do Des a lot of good. That he was eclectic. Well, and synthetic, maybe so, but so I do have that memory of Glacial View.
Because Arthur was one of the 10, along with Norm, one of the 6, along with Norm, that were part of the 10-point document.
Right.
They'd kind of been dragged into that. That was kind of the death knell document for Des.
Yeah. One of the two students of Des's who were on that group.
Yeah.
And Arthur was terribly pained by that experience.
Did he feel like, it was interesting talking to Norm about it the other day? He felt that it was something he wished he could have done differently, or if he'd realised, I think, that they were kind of using him and the others in a way. I definitely don't think he was intentionally going in there to try and create the document that was to end Des's career at all.
Right.
Not suggesting that, but he did express some lament. Did Arthur Furch express a bit of lament about being involved?
Oh, the only thing what he was lamenting was the difficulty of having to defend Des in these circumstances, the difficulty of defending a different approach to putting together theology. But I don't know whether he didn't say anything about feeling used, or I mean, we didn't go down that road. But he was terribly distressed, and he talked on and on and on. I remember my parents were visiting, and they were waiting for me, and Arthur had me by the ear, and I couldn't get away. But he was very much worked up about it, and very unhappy.
Right.
Very, very unhappy.
A lot of people have said, "Oh, if Des had said it differently, or done it differently, or listened to my advice," but I don't think they realised that it was a bubble coming up from the ocean, and you couldn't adjust it or pick it or change. It was going to erupt, and
it was.
And I don't think Des. I wouldn't fault his approach at all. Like it was.
And Arthur wasn't exactly faulting him. He
No.
was just saying how different it was, and that was difficult for him to handle the way Des did it.
Yeah.
Yes, this was not to fault Des at all. In fact, I recently presented a paper about analytic versus synthetic philosophy approaches. I tend to be like Arthur, more analytic. And I said, we will destroy a whole argument if we find one link in the chain weak, but the synthetic thinkers are the ones who inspire us.
Yeah.
And they sometimes get at the big truths.
Yes.
That we kind of miss because we're tied up in the details.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Was that a live presentation you made, or an article you wrote?
It was a live presentation.
Oh, is that available at all? That'd be a fascinating.
No, it was kind of ad-libbed, because it was in a group, and it was a response to something else that we had heard presented. So that was part of my response.
Now, Lyndon Rogers would have been around at the time as well. Yeah. He was a Pathfinder. It's funny, we had these lecturers, and he was our Pathfinder counsellor, and so my introduction was not Lyndon Rogers, the incredible mind. It was the guy showing us how to light fires and tie knots. A wonderful guy. I ran into him recently at the bank in Morisset. I'm going to try and see if he can join us for an interview as well. So soon after that, you left. What year was that?
I left in 1983. And just before I left, Calvin Edwards came through Kurumbong. Do you remember Kelvin?
Yes, yeah,
Kelvin worked with Des on Good News
that's
Unlimited for a
right.
while.
Yeah,
Right. And he contacted me. I had taught Kelvin at Lilydale Academy back
right.
in the day. And then he was at Avondale when I was teaching there. So he wrote to me and he said, I'm coming through. Can I stay with you? And maybe we could have a get together with some people. I thought, oh, yeah, that'd be great, because I just felt that the campus was so supportive of Des. This would be a wonderful occasion. And it was before Kelvin left Good News Unlimited and all of that happened. So I put a note in everybody's mailbox and expecting, oh, great, we'll be there. Potluck, what will we bring? I got some nasty, nasty notes back that
What?
shocked me. Some of the faculty said, how dare I bring the trouble onto the campus like this? But the mass
Yeah, yeah,
turned
yeah,
up.
yeah.
Yeah. But I
Yeah,
was surprised.
that has
And I was,
surprised me. There's been a
yes,
hush
it
hush.
shocked me.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely shocked me. Yeah.
Um, but it was a good catch up.
Oh, it's
Yeah.
great. It's great. And of course, we've caught up multiple times since then over
Excellent.
here in the US.
And what's he doing now?
He runs a business consulting and advising philanthropic organizations.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
I can just
I,
imagine him doing something like that.
yeah. At one point, after he left Good News Unlimited, he visited me when I was a student at Harvard and stayed with me there. And we did some talking and traveling around together. And we're trying to find a career path for him.
Mm.
And we were talking about, maybe he was always interested in kind of like social justice and good causes and that kind
Mm.
of thing. So we thought maybe he would apply to work with the UN, or, we were just thrashing about trying to find ideas, because he's brilliant, got a brilliant
Yeah,
mind.
a very
He ended
smart
up
and vivacious, energetic kind of personality too.
a wonderful
Yeah,
person. So it was good that he found his niche.
yeah. Oh, that's good.
I recently heard from him just a couple of weeks ago. I think he was in Malta. He and Nerida, his wife,
Yeah.
were doing their consulting over there for a little while.
Oh, wow. Well, next time you
Yeah,
talk to him, tell him I'd love to interview him for the series.
right. Uh,
Can I touch on it?
Kelvin, by the way, Kelvin, I think, has become has taken a much more conservative line than I have.
Right.
I think, and he lives in Georgia, which that explains a lot too.
So you're meaning conservative politically, not conservative
Yes.
Adventist. Yeah.
No, he's not Adventist, but I think he belongs to a conservative
Yeah.
Christian denomination.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Can I just sidetrack a little bit because it interests me, and I know that many women. It's funny talking like as if there's kind of a problem with women's stuff, because my mum, has been a wonderful example of just strong woman. So I've never seen this model of inequality really being around Avondale. Plenty of strong men and women. I don't see the equality thing as I probably should, but I'm glad I see it the way I do. I kind of see inequality for men and women, but there is a special nature of problem that was occurring, I think, in the 70s and in the 80s and beyond, where with women's wages. And what's the lady's name? She wrote that book now. I know her really well. I've just got a mental blank.
Yeah, I know who you
Mary
mean.
De Silva.
Oh, isn't
Can't
that
believe
silly?
I've forgotten. Terrible.
Oh,
Mary Kay De Silva.
yes,
And she took the church, well, threatened to take legal action because she was doing the exact same job as a fellow worker who was a male and getting,
yes,
I think, almost half that he was getting. Um,
yes.
what was the landscape for women working? This is a long way to get to the question. I'll edit it out later. What was the landscape for women with regards to pay in the 70s and early 80s when you were at Avondale within the Adventist Church?
You know, it became clearer to me just before I left that salaries and wages were not something we talked about.
Mm.
And I remember thinking, here we had the division guys come up and talk to the graduating class of teachers, to share their duties and responsibilities and the appointment processes and all the rest. And I said to them, tell these young people what they're going to earn. Well, they were aghast that I would even raise such a question. You didn't go into the Lord's work with any concern about salary.
The men did, though.
So, what's that?
The men
The men did.
to.
Oh, well, they probably did, but they were not going to share it with our graduates.
Yeah.
They refused to do it. And so I think basically it was like a non-issue because we were blind to it.
Yeah, okay.
I remember I had one little debacle. I moved into, what's that house called? Pine Lodge.
Oh,
You know,
yes.
Pine Lodge.
Yeah.
Okay, I was moved into the top floor of that. And so I applied for the soft furnishings allowance. And the policy was because I was single, I only got half as much.
Yeah.
So I said I had a copy of the Family Law in Australia. It was a big, thick volume. I marched into Eric's office and I said, I'd like to know why I'm only getting half as much as my male colleagues. Oh, well, he said, you're just single. I said, so that means that I only put half a curtain up on my window and I only buy half a couch and I only buy half a kitchen table. I said, this doesn't make any sense at all.
Yeah.
So I got the full allowance.
Oh, really? That's
Yes.
great. Wow. Good on
But
you.
I did have to fight for it a bit. Yeah.
Were you aware of Mary Kay's, I think it was 1978, was it? I can't remember, or early 70s?
I don't remember the dates. And I met her co-writer, Lorna.
Oh, wow.
What's Lorna's name now?
Yeah, I know who you mean.
Silly. But I met her at some women's meetings in the US. And, Mary Kay and Lorna had assumed like gigantic proportions. I thought they'd be at least 6'5". And Lorna's probably 5 foot if she's lucky. She's this tiny little thing, but talk about full of vim and vigor and ready to go. I think the most patronizing thing that happened to me in Australia was just before I left to go overseas to travel, I had to go to the division office and they said, now, we know you're accepted to a university over there, but we want you to go, first of all, for a year to Andrews because young people like you go to a big university and they lose their faith. I was 40, about 40 at the time. I was so incensed by that.
Interesting.
I thought, how many men have they said this to?
Yes. Yeah.
Treating me like a child. So I had to go for a year to Andrews, fiddling around doing another master's degree. I mean, I had fun while I was there. I got to know the Adventist people there. I got very involved in the women's issues with them.
But it's funny they would say that you'd lose your faith going to an Adventist institution.
No. Going to another institution. I had to go to Andrews.
I see what you mean. Yeah. Isn't that funny?
Mm-hmm.
And yet, within Adventist circles, Andrews and Avondale are considered the places to go now to lose your faith.
Right. Yes, it's a funny world.
Well, the Concerned Brethren was starting to pick up steam in the early 80s. Were you aware of their movement at that time?
Gosh. Oh, yes.
Tell us the memories you have of the Concerned Brethren.
Well, they kind of clustered as a group of retirees mostly, didn't they? And it was kind of really, they were a force to be reckoned with because they were causing a lot of trouble, but they never kind of touched my life personally. When I came to the US, I was invited to speak to a women's group, Adventist women's group in Orlando. And they were very concerned that this Australian was coming. It was like the American version of the Concerned Brethren. Oh. So it was kind of international.
Yeah.
And the retreat center that the Adventists have in Orlando has a zoo for animals that have kind of use their past their use by date. They had lions and other creatures. So while we were preparing for the first meeting, this lion started roaring, and they were making jokes about the concerned brethren
Hanging out nearby.
were doing their thing. Yeah.
I think, sorry, go on.
We kind of just regarded the concerned brethren as troublemakers, and better to avoid them. We knew they were there. We knew it was divisive. But within the group of faculty that I was friendly with, we kind of had our group, and these people could rage around us, but they weren't going to shake us.
In many ways, they would have just stayed as a bunch of retiree ministers grumbling in Kurumbong. If it weren't for the Standish brothers, they took it on as being the younger concerned brethren and signees, because I think it was 16 or 19 people that signed this document as the concerned brethren, which they'd sent off to the president of the day, and they were quite successful in taking the message out of Kurumbong and to the world. Like, they eventually started Heartland, I think, and many of the conservative, independent ministries can find links to Heartland. In fact, I've done a bit of research and I could not find any. I found a link between the Standish Brothers, so Concerned Brethren, Standish Brothers, Heartland, and every single one of the independent fundamental ministry leaders. Did you have much to do with them at all? Did you ever cross paths, have conversations? Because they're very intelligent men, weren't they?
Oh yes. I mean, Colin Standish, I knew. He was one of our lecturers when I was doing my primary teaching. I think we did psychology with him.
Right.
So that's only how I knew him. I didn't know him at this stage, at the Glacier View stage.
Do you what do you think is the basic difference that they disagreed with Des on, with the investigative judgment, righteous by faith? What is it that they were most worried about that Des was bringing to the church?
I simply don't know. I didn't follow them. I wasn't interested in that. I wanted to keep as far away from all that controversy as I could. So I'm probably not the right person to be interviewed here, but really I wasn't interested and I didn't follow it.
Yeah.
I just knew they were there. I knew it was trouble. I knew there was a hardness and a nastiness connected with a lot of this. I knew it was attacking what I held dear and believed in with all my heart. I felt threatened by it. I was glad not to get too deeply into some of that. And of course, a lot of it happened after I left Australia.
Yes, yeah. Yes, that's true. I was talking to Peter Marks and Wendy and their daughter Ruth Ellen the other night, and it was really great to hear Wendy and Ruth Ellen's view, and Peter as well, because obviously Peter's the son of Raglan, who was one of the key vocal voice piece, mouthpiece for the Concerned Brethren, and did a lot of funding as well for them.
Yes. I mean, we knew all the names. We knew all the names of the Concerned Brethren.
Oh yeah, and I
Peter and
my one of a great moment was when Ruth Ellen said to Peter in the interview about them all meeting together. I think at Burnside's place. I'm not sure, but she said, "Well, where were all the women?" And where do you think the women were with this? This is largely it was a male kind of dominated scenario, event, conspiracy, fallout, political manoeuvring. What were the women thinking during all of this time?
Well, it was largely a men's battlefield.
Yeah.
We didn't have women theologians. When I went to Andrews, I was shocked. Here were these women with doctorates teaching in the seminary. Couldn't believe it. And some of the wonderful women speakers from La Sierra and other places.
Right.
Women in theology. I mean, this was totally foreign to my experience. In fact, women with doctorates was foreign to me. We had none at Avondale.
Yeah.
And yet we had a bunch of them at Andrews. So, it seemed like the men were battling. It's well, this is where, going back to how we started this conversation, this is where it kind of left me a bit cold, because it wasn't reaching. I felt like there was something lacking in all this debating and horribleness and nastiness that was going on. And that's why I was seeking alternative ways to kind of get in touch with God, find my heart in the soul somehow,
Yeah,
connecting.
that's a really important thing because that you're saying, because I think that also is why a lot of the young people today are saying, "Can we just stop talking about it?" And here I am saying we should talk about it because they say we can't. But I
Right,
get their point, and their point is that they want to explore the things that have meaning because this is a short life. Do we have to just and ironically, I guess I'm trying to talk about this stuff to move it out of the way so we can talk about things that give our lives more meaning. And I also feel you can do both. Um, do you think men and women are wired differently in a way that
yes,
makes
yes.
women feel like they want more of a connection? Can you unpack a little bit of your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think so. There's some wonderful books written on women's ways of knowing. And I think it applies as much to religion as it does to any other field. Um, they're more interested in relationships. I mean, generalizations and stereotypes are bad, right?
Yeah,
But
yeah.
there's a tendency for women to be more interested in relationships and in connecting with people and in caring, where the men tend to be more interested in justice, being right, um, hierarchies. Men are
Mm.
very much more hierarchical in their thinking. And so we had, like the champions from Des's side meeting the champions from the concerned brethren,
Mm.
and the women were concerned about, you know, how we're holding all this church together,
Yeah. See,
how
that's
we
important.
connect, and yeah, and the women are kind of freer to move away from the literal into the figurative,
Mm.
and find in stories and storytelling. If the analysis have been done of the kind of metaphors men use when they're thinking about understanding, it tends to be, I see it, I am enlightened, I've caught a vision, right?
Mm.
All to do with the eyes. The women will say, can you hear my voice?
Mm.
Are you listening to me? Can you
Mm.
hear me? What
Mm.
am I hearing? So, these are profound differences.
Yes.
That
Yes.
when they work together, there's a wholeness. Neither one is right, neither one is wrong, but
Yes.
both of them are incomplete in a sense. But it was those kinds of things that was lacking that drove me into the study of philosophy of religion and philosophy generally on how do we make meaning. And I was particularly interested by how women make meaning.
Yes.
So the stories and the myths and the metaphors and the people,
What
the
a
connection.
wonderful environment it would be if men and women could grasp that and truly build something together. Um,
Exactly. Exactly. This is to me the strongest argument for the ministry, for women in ministry.
oh yes, yeah.
How much stronger it would be.
Oh, imagine. And
Imagine.
I feel, and I've said it a lot and gotten into trouble, that I feel that not only should women be more in the high levels of the Adventist Church and in ministry and officially given the title ordination. Ordination means nothing, but if you're using it as a weapon of suppression, it does mean something.
Right.
And so I'd like to see men and women that aren't ordained have access to all positions within the Adventist Church. It would suddenly open up a whole new realm instead of an ordained male minister given a job that he's obviously not good at in the business realm. They'd give it to someone that's actually good at business that may not even have a theological degree at all. And women would be allowed to be the SPD president, and it would. I think that's the one thing that would fix all the problems within the Adventist Church, is open up all positions to the right person for the job, regardless of gender, regardless of having a theological degree.
There's a wonderful writer, Virginia Mollencott, who teaches at Chicago Divinity School. But she said, so, the men were created with the upper body strength, the big muscles, the strong hands, perfect for digging ditches and fixing up roofs. And women, women on the other hand, were, to be bringing up the children, caring for the needs of the sick, caring for the dying, nurturing the family. Now, they're the skills we need in ministry, not the ditch diggers and the roof builders. We need the caring mothers and women.
It's interesting. My wife is Irish and has quite a strong Viking history, and the Vikings actually they come across as the men that are take over the world, kill everybody, rape and pillage. But the women in their society were very strong and held in high regard, and often had high levels of leadership position. And so she'd never heard of Adventists till she'd met me. And so we have an interesting relationship balancing those exact things. And it works. It works.
Well, there have been some funny things going around on Facebook about which countries have dealt most successfully with the virus. Taiwan, New Zealand, Germany, all run by women.
What do you think?
But look at England and look at the US with their leadership. Macho, hopeless.
When I've criticised, here's an interesting thing I'd love your perspective on. When I've criticised in some of my Facebook groups, this only happened when I started criticising union leaders and SPD leaders, and Ted Wilson. The most criticism I got came from women. What's going on there? Like when I criticised the SPD for not speaking up enough at the Autumn Council and for the no vote and for not taking advantage of the opportunities they had, the most anger I got was from women.
Were they against the ordination of women?
No,
or
they're
against
supporters.
Criticism?
They're supporters of the ordination, women's ordination.
Yeah, I think the women's movement has shot itself in the foot largely in that it's become an ideology, and almost like an exclusiveness is settled in that only women can speak for women.
Right. Oh.
And
right.
Yeah, I think that's been very destructive.
Wow.
A couple of things have been.
Yeah, can you unpack that a bit more?
Yeah. Well, all along, women have said a woman's worst enemy is another woman. It's like you're threatening who they are.
Mm.
And then to have men kind of assume, well, I got a bit irritated working with the women's stuff here in the North American setting. We had some wonderful men from the seminary and from other places around the country who spoke strongly and supportively and theologically about the importance for the women to have this ministerial role in the church.
Mm.
But often they would dominate the women's meetings.
Right.
Right. So we'd come to I remember at Sligo Church, we had the Association of Adventist Women meeting. They came from all over the country. Many came from Europe. Big thing. But the preacher had to be the man.
Right.
Man was the preacher, right? So, there's some reasons why women don't like men speaking for them.
Yes.
But still, they're shooting themselves in the foot by doing that.
Yeah, men like to go, okay, well, you've given me this position of authority. Now I will run with it as much as I can to help you.
Yes. And I think they feel like we've been helped enough. Stop helping us.
Yes.
Now, that's kind of going back to Glacier View and Desford and all the rest of it. I think one of the connections for me is based on kind of like feminist theology. I'm trying to put this in the most tactful way possible, but it's almost as though the wages of sin had to be paid for with the death of Jesus, right? And the sin of pride is just like the worst thing. So you start with, I am just a sinful wretch, right? And then you build the gospel. The gospel comes then and has the message of salvation and so on. But women resent that a little bit.
Right.
Because we've always been told we are sinful wretches.
Yes.
Subordinate, second class.
Yeah. You're only from the rib.
Yeah. Pride is not always the women's sin.
Yeah.
Predominantly, it's self-denial, self-abnegation of self.
Yes.
It's well, I am no good. What could I do? I'm hopeless. I've come to believe this. I've always been told that. What we want is a gospel that says you are loved, you are good, you have all this potential. There are possibilities for you. Now that's not missing in the other view, but it's not as strong a voice.
Yes. Yes. And if you...
So that's what I fear about too literal an understanding of any of Scripture.
Yes.
Raises more questions than it answers.
Yes.
And one of the questions it raises is this a male view of salvation?
Yes. I was just about to say, when you base your religion and spiritual path on a Bible that obviously does have a masculine view of salvation, you're going to always run into trouble.
I remember that Bill Cosby piece where he said the difference between a mother God and a father God. Adam and Eve are expelled from the garden. Get the kids out of here, shut the gates, put the angel at the gates. They misbehaved, justice will be served. And the mother God says, where are the kids? What are they doing out there in the cold? Bring them back in, give them some dinner, put them in a cozy bed.
I love it.
And it also connects up with Glacier View in this way, is that the same thinking that was against what Des was trying to bring fresh and new to the church, the gospel story, was resisted no matter what theological arguments could be brought, no matter how clear it was. It had nothing to do with clarity of argument and persuasiveness, like the women's thing. No matter how much we could persuade from the scriptures and show by all kinds of illustrations that the women were to be equal in the church, there was something that was stopping both messages, the same thing. And I think there we have that sin of pride, and we've got to be in control, and we're going to be giving up some control here. We can't let this preacher have all the world wandering after, following him and believing him. We can't have the women taking over. It was the same thing.
And if you base your religion saying that the man has the final word, and that's essentially what, if you say a woman cannot be ordained, oh, she can do this, and she does a wonderful ministry over here, and we have women in ministry, and oh, this general secretary is a woman, and whatever. But the final word is the man, because a woman cannot have that top job. If you have a religion run like that, this is a reason we have to talk about Glacier View as well, and these topics, because the young people who do just want to get on with it will ultimately come to this wall again and again and again. And the church leadership at the moment is exactly like it was. Ted Wilson's day is exactly like Neil Wilson's day. And so if we don't talk about it, we just can't get on with this beautiful nurturing model that we've been talking about until we remove the people that are stopping it happening and the mindset of people are happening.
Yeah. So 30 years ago, I marched up to Neil Wilson at Andrews. He was having lunch, sat down with him. Had with me this wonderful young woman from Europe who was wanting to be a minister and was training, and talked with him about, introduced them, thought she was the best argument there was because she was just such a wonderful person, just exuding this wonderful warmth. And went to the Biblical Research Institute on another occasion with a little group and address the people there. I mean, all of this we were doing back in the 80s. And I just can't bear to hear the current news because it's like there's been no progress.
Exactly.
Nothing has
It's
changed.
going backwards. The ground that was had peaked at Jan Paulsen's presidency and began its dive at the booing of Jan Paulsen at the no vote.
Yeah, yeah.
And this is what people are not seeing. The Liberals are not seeing, and they go, "Oh, they're still saying, oh, it's changing. It's going to change." I'm like, really? What are you doing to bring about the change? Oh, I'm more about loving Jesus than doing. Okay, so you don't care about your children. You don't care about the young people growing up in this. You either leave or you do something to make the change. And I'm not seeing any action, I'm afraid.
Yeah, yeah. In 1985, 86, 87, somewhere in there, I was invited to be a delegate at the North American Division annual meeting, I think it was.
What year was that?
I think in the late 80s. In the late 80s.
Right.
And it was held at Andrews at the seminary. They have a lovely big meeting room there. And they had a report, as part of the whole show, on the agenda was a report from the seminary. And they put up these PowerPoint slides showing every demographic in the world. These are the age groups of the seminarians presently studying. These are the conferences and the divisions around the world that they come from. This is the ethnic breakdown. Oh, wonderful, wonderful. And I quietly put up my hand. I was very nervous and very shy with my Australian accent. I said, do we know how many women? It's the only demographic we've left out is the male-female ratio. Because I was doing a lot of my courses in the seminary and I knew these women. Well, the North American Division president absolutely hauled me over the coals in that meeting.
Who was
How
it?
dare
Who was
I
it?
bring this trouble into this meeting? It was the African-American man who was supposed to be the big voice for women's ordination.
Was that the guy, Charles?
Look,
I can't remember. I think I know who you mean. Wow.
Yeah.
And he literally took
I
you
was
aside.
shocked at this.
He literally took you
No,
aside
bawled me out in the meeting publicly.
in the meeting.
How dare I bring this troublesome topic up? Several people in the room came to me afterwards and they were aghast.
Yeah.
But I thought, we're making no progress. If they can't speak for you, they won't let you speak for yourself. I was silenced. And see, and that's what women, they talk about their voice, they talk about being heard.
Do they realize it's pointless in a way? In the Adventist church, you will not be heard. So A, men don't speak up for us, and B, what do? We just...
And even the men that speak up for us still want us to speak for ourselves. Too often. I mean, there are some very enlightened people. This is not a cover-all for everybody. There's wonderful, wonderful men in the church who get it. But there's no progress. Absolutely no progress, it seems. See, and that's how the people kind of with the gospel must feel too. No progress.
Yeah. 2,000 years later. And
Yeah, right.
Have you seen in your travels any Christian organisation that's at least getting there?
That's a great question. When we first moved to Bloomington, Indiana, which of course is not wonderful New England with its liberal views, but anyway, Bloomington, Indiana is a little oasis in the Midwest with a wonderful internationally renowned university. And around the perimeter of the university is a ring road. And all the churches of the various faiths are lined up along that ring road, including the Adventist church.
Wow.
So we were going to the Adventist church for a while, and we thought, oh, these people are really friendly. How nice. These people are just so lovely. We realized that we'd be really friendly with somebody one Sabbath. We go the next week, and they wouldn't be there, because the people who were friendly were the visitors. The regular members were not at all friendly. And the pastor came to me one day and he said, "No, I want you to know you have no role in this church." And I'd just been sitting quietly in the pews. But there are 3 reasons. He said, first of all, he said, you're an academic. And we find the academics here, they come in for a while, the students, they worship with us, and then they go off when they graduate. So they're just disruptive. The second reason, he said, is you're a woman. And this is not the place for women to be speaking up. And thirdly, you're an Australian. And I think that was a reference to Des and all that. So I thought, okay, this is not my spiritual home.
Yeah, but I like the you're talking about the ring road. It might reminded me of when you go to fast food places where there's a McDonald's and a Kentucky Fried and a Pizza Hut and
right. Here it was the churches. Anyway, so some of our neighbours, in fact, both in Bloomington and here on Cape Cod, are really devoted Unitarians.
Yes.
Right. And so we've tried the churches there and here, but I don't know, they just seem to be such a mishmash of stuff.
Yeah.
I kind of can't get my arms around it somehow.
Yeah.
They're very keen on social justice issues. They build really strong community. You could go to do something at the church every day of their life. You know, they have classes, they have tours, they have all kinds of interesting things. But, you know, it just kind of left me a bit cold. Pastor Jorgensen used to say, the Unitarians, when they pray, they say, "To whom it may concern." They don't have any kind of... But, you know, they kind of summed it up. So then we tried the Episcopalians, which, of course, is the Church of England here.
The Anglicans.
But that was so Anglican. That was so highbrow and so ritualized that left me cold. The music was lovely.
Yeah.
And the rituals, some of the rituals are very moving. Then we tried the Methodists, and I tell you, we went at Easter time, and at the front of the church is the with the black material draped over the cross. And at one point, they all looked to that cross and sang a hymn or said a prayer. I found that very moving. But other than that, it felt like being in an Adventist church. And I didn't feel any more liberated or touched by God. So that was hopeless. So, you know, I don't know. I guess if you're looking for the liberation of women, it's the Unitarians, but you've got to take all the other stuff with it.
Yeah.
There are pockets. They're wonderful pockets. The Memorial Church in Harvard Yard, the Memorial Church, marvelous.
Yes. There are pockets, in spite of the compliance authoritarian leadership view, there are pockets that still... But I always feel like I want to push against that as well, because it's like, well, yep, sure, our nice little church down here is great, but it's still a part of something that's going to eventually suppress you. It's still a part of something where if you evangelize and bring people in, they're going to suddenly come across someone giving them the great controversy. So I wonder... I said to John Rosier the other night, I said I'd prefer that people just don't gather around a belief structure. They just gather around as humans and share their ideas and thoughts and beliefs and have no leadership hierarchy, just get together around some food and music and share different ideas. But he then said, but then you might have atheists and other people come in with those beliefs. And you know what? And at that moment I thought, okay, well, maybe there's a way you can create an Adventist church that might work away from Adventism but have all the good Adventist stuff. But I also thought, I do have a lot of great atheist friends, and I'd like them to come
Yeah,
around for dinner too.
yeah,
So maybe there's no answer.
yeah.
Maybe the answer is just small groups of friends hanging out.
That's basically where I came to on this. I think I saw um, my early years as an Adventist worker as like a pebble rolling happily around in the waves as they broke up on the shore and so on, and very happily surrounded by all of the action and movement and ideas and so on. But one day the tide went out and I was left high and dry. Like I didn't deliberately decide to do it,
Right.
it just kind of happened.
Yeah. So all of a sudden, you didn't decide to leave Adventism. It kind of had just left you.
I still have my name on the roll at Avondale.
Wow.
And I still don't drink alcohol or smoke or eat meat, or I
Yeah.
still don't work on the weekends because I like a Sabbath.
Yeah. Yeah.
Adventism had a tremendous amount of good to offer.
Exactly.
I still enjoy reading the book Education as a philosophy of
Mm.
education.
Mm.
Brilliant.
And Adventist people are
But
good
going to
fun.
a church and having a man stand up the front,
Yeah. Yeah.
always a man here,
Yeah. Yeah.
kind of belittling and berating and carrying on. I'd come home from church, I'd be angry.
Mm.
And I thought, this is not feeding my soul.
If a man came along and said, "Look, I want to start something new," because you need a facilitator, you need someone to facilitate something happening. If it happened to be a man, and he said, "I'm starting something new. We're having all the good things about Adventism. Women can have high-level leadership. We're going to gather together. We're not going to have the same kind of hierarchy." And if it was because it was a man who said that, would that be something that you would discourage women following? Or would women
No,
be discouraged to follow something like that?
I don't know. I don't know. I don't think that would matter.
Right.
As long as the vision was jointly developed,
Right.
it wasn't something that was brought to you.
Yeah.
If it kind of sprang organically out of a group.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
But I think formalizing religion gets back to literalizing.
Yes.
One of the books that I was really moved by was Paul Tillich's. Now I should know the name of this. Something in faith, doubt and faith, or something like that. Anyway, the role of doubt, and too many organized religious events have no doubt. It's all clear cut.
Yeah.
They've lost touch with mystery.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's literal and it answers every question, and every question, like poor Des, when you think back at it, if there was ever a Q&A time, questions would be thrown at Des about all sorts of things
Yeah.
that he wasn't really qualified or trained to do, but he was expected to know, and he would usually come up with something pretty good as an answer. But,
Yeah.
you kind of lose touch with
Well,
mystery, the mystery
that's
of the
why
divine.
my church, if I was able to organically start one, would have atheists, and I'm more interested in
Yes,
people's ideas and letting them express their ideas.
yes,
There's a lot of people
yes.
I love hanging out with, and I don't care what they believe or don't believe.
Yeah, yeah. Some of our closest friends here in Yarmouth are whiskey drinking former Catholic nuns and priests. And they're just fabulous people.
Yeah.
They would do anything for you, and
Yeah.
I don't know, they seem to do have some kind of hold on the divine
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
the Adventists don't have. Some of our best
Yeah.
friends are Anglican ministers,
Mm.
wonderful people.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah. So another book that really influenced me was Rudolf Otto's The Holy,
All
and
right.
he talks about the numinous. This, it's not irrational, it's not rational. It's kind of supernatural. It's meaning beyond the rational. Um, and he uses two phrases that are great: mysterium tremendum and mysterium fascinans.
Oh.
Mysterium tremendum talks about the awe. I don't think too many Adventists come out of church feeling like they have any awe
Mm.
from their sermons.
Mm.
And the mysterium tremendum, the fascinating, you're really attracted to it. It has an attraction. That's a mystery where all the questions are not answered, but the searching is what is kind of attractive.
Yes, I love that.
I took some lovely courses with Fritz Guy when I was at Andrews. Every time he stood up to teach a class, I was sitting in the front row. But he started one class with a quote from Augustine that stuck in my mind. It was, faith seeking understanding. Like, you don't know it all, but the journey into this mystery is just fabulous.
Yes.
That's the spiritual life.
Yeah.
It might not be the religious life, the formal religious life,
Yeah.
but it's the spiritual life.
Yeah.
Seeking understanding, never fully knowing, but always being attracted to it and being struck by the awesomeness of it.
Yes, yes.
I love all that.
Yes, me too. Me too. I wish when I was younger that I was smart and I could have had conversations with you as a lecturer. I was too much the muso surfy dude that was kind of my world was full of that divine devotion connection. I just didn't have the academic skills at that stage to be able to engage in a more academic kind of study of it.
Yeah, right. Well, I certainly didn't either. But, I'm very grateful for my doctoral studies.
Yeah.
That was a place. I spent most of my doctorate in education in either the philosophy department or the divinity school.
Yeah.
And that's where I really started to dig into some of this stuff. And I was so responsive to it. It just was a wonderful journey.
To dig deep into something, yeah. There's a lot of women, and I'm responsible for causing these problems too. That as a man, we can steamroll, and I've even got to be careful in interviewing people that I don't suddenly go, oh, that reminds me of when I did this. And it's important that a common thing that people have said to me is that men just steamroll and they'll interrupt and they'll push. And when men are talking to men, that works. We have these robust kind of conversations where we're vying for position and hierarchy, and it's almost a fun kind of thing. But we've got to be very careful when we're doing it around people that don't respond to that. But
we're not, where's my voice? Is my voice being heard? Yeah.
That's right. And I've been at fault at this as well, where we're kind of sharing our voice, allowing a woman to share her voice, and then bringing that into the group of thought to then keep pressing your opinion. And I get that now. I get it. And what I can see now is there's generations of women that are hurting. They've been hurt. Their mothers have been hurt. Their grandmothers have been hurt. What kind of healing can come to these women? What healing advice would you give to women that have just felt that their voices have not been heard?
Oh, dear.
And what recommendation moving forward would you offer them? Advice.
I think one of the paths to healing is to dig into the images that people have in their mind. I did a little study with women at Andrews. I was actually in a class at Harvard, but still had connections at Andrews. And I interviewed them at various stages of their life about what images of God they held in their minds. So I'd kind of set it up by saying something like, just empty your mind for a moment. Just don't worry about anything. Don't think about anything in particular. Now, if I say the word God, what comes to mind? Right? So I was absolutely amazed at what came out. None of it, one, traditional Adventist imagery. I was just shocked. The youngest person said, I see a picture of Jesus, and I see in my mind, I see it hanging on my bedroom wall, and I see the eyes are looking at me. And when I leave the room, I feel like I've got to say, I will be back or would you like to come with me? That was the most literal image of all. That was the youngest woman. A woman in her more midlife, I'm skipping over a few, but in the midlife, I said, when I say the word God, what do you think? She was very quiet for a while, and her whole body language, she just kind of sank down into herself, and she said, I see the letters G-O-D written on a piece of paper, typed on a piece of paper. And I said, what else do you see? Nothing else. I said, turn the paper over. What's on the back of it? Nothing. And she was so distraught that her image of God was virtually nothing. Then I interviewed a woman who was in her 70s. She was a wonderful person. She used to write for Faith for Today. She used to write the script for Faith for Today. I can't remember her name, but anyway, she was just a wonderful kind of eccentric older woman. And I said, so what do you see? She said, nothing. I said, you see absolutely no, nothing. And I said, do you hear anything? Of course. I said, what do you hear? Music. I said, who's playing the music? All the creatures of the universe. And they all have their, and then she started to elaborate, they all have their own note. And when you bring it all together, it makes this beautiful music of the spheres, and it fills the whole universe. And it's such a wonderful, warm and nurturing sound. And you want to join in and participate. And she went on and on. That's what they saw when they saw God. And what I saw about that was kind of there's this development. You know, you can be very traditional. You grow up with particular images. Jesus is my shepherd, and you know, the various images that we have, and we have a very literal picture of a man with a beard and a robe. But then there comes a time, and you go as you mature, where those become a little bit shaky and might even disappear. But we've got to recognize that that's a developmental stage. It's not a sin. That person hasn't lost their faith. It's just reforming and reshaping. And the older woman represented like this wonderful, inclusive, imagistic vision of what God was that included the whole unit, included sound and music and a picture in her mind, tremendously large and wonderful. So I think, you know, for women who have been kind of beaten down about all this, it might be a place to start. You know, what do you see? And to have a conversation and keep pushing the boundaries, getting more and more explanation, then you know what you're dealing with. Mm. Otherwise, we might think we're dealing with, okay, this is what the Bible says. Now, what do these people think? We've got to bring them into line with the Bible somehow by counselling, when we might need to think more imagistically about it as a healing procedure. So I've done exercises like this with lots of women's groups, and always they've had a wonderful response about it. And I think there's a kind of a relief for them to know that they don't actually believe exactly what you might find in a doctrinal statement by the church.
Mm. I love it. Is there ways that women that that resonate with what you're saying, could they contact you, or are there groups that you recommend they could contact to help join in that kind of a process?
I don't know what to say in answer to that. I'm not a therapist. I'm a philosopher. Yeah.
And you don't want to suddenly have 50 people contact you, but are there places that you could...
By the same time, I wouldn't shut the door on anybody.
No. But maybe in the comments later, if you think of any people or groups that are involved with that kind of thing, you might be able to share a link.
I tried it once in a church. I was invited to kind of speak to this big Sabbath school class of a couple of hundred people that met at a church in Colorado. And I started off by saying, I used the word image. Well, immediately the concerned brethren in the group started beating up on me. Yeah. God forbade images and all this kind of nonsense. And I said, So, what are you going to say to the psalmist? You said, the Lord is my shepherd. That's not an image. So, I mean, I don't know of any groups that do this. You've got the crazies
But
and the nutters.
maybe someone watching can start a group for
Yeah,
women
right.
to help. They'll listen back to what you've said, and this is the process we're going to help women go through.
But I love talking about this. If anybody
Yeah.
wanted to talk about it, of course.
It's been up until I left. It's been infuriating being a musician in Adventism because you have the beautiful golden moments on all sides of the church, all spectrums, but you just have this constant. You just know that there's a constant. Someone's going to get up and say, "Oh, you just tapped your foot then," or something. So I can only begin to imagine how infuriating times 10 it must be for women, because there's so many more things that that they get pulled up on. Where your partner is Estelle, and she is the daughter of Alfred Jorgensen, and he was a lecturer at college as well, or
Sure, yeah.
did he hold positions of leadership in the union or SPD at all?
He was, when he left Avondale, he was field secretary for the division.
Right.
And it was at the time when the whole Ford crisis hit the church. And he was pastoral, and yet he was a serious scholar of the scriptures. And he was in this terrible bind, and the stress of trying to hold the church together at a difficult time, and yet not betray his own beliefs in the gospel and so on, brought him to the point where he had a serious heart attack. Estelle said she went with him on one occasion. He had to meet with a group of concerned church people, including a lot of concerned brethren, and he was so weak from his heart trouble that she had to carry his bag for him, and people just attacked him mercilessly. But so he found it very, very difficult. He hated to see the church divided, and yet he didn't want to see the gospel lost.
Would he have theologically agreed with a lot of what Des had said, do you think?
Oh, I'm sure, yeah.
So he was field secretary at a time when Keith Parmenter and Athol Tolist were around. How did they get on? That would
I
have
don't know. He was, he was walking this fine line all the time. But he was a diplomat. He had a different personality with Des. Des would speak out. Des was a straight shooter. I think Pastor Jorgensen was more of a diplomat, more careful, more ponderous into what he did. And I think some people have misread that badly and kind of condemned him for being too silent and too complicit, when he really wasn't at all. He was doing what he could from within, rather than from without.
with the resources he had. Anyone I've spoken to in the interviews has spoken highly of him.
You know, it was an interesting thing. He was very Germanic, right? Very studious, very ponderous. He always wanted to be a theologian, always wanted to be a scholar. So he came to Avondale, did the ministry, and they sent him out as a literature evangelist for a couple of years in the outback of Western Australia, can you believe? He very nearly died of hunger. Wow. He was so poor. And when he came into the ministry, he ended up at Avondale, largely unqualified. He did his best to get a master's degree, but he was just a scholar at heart. He always had his books open. His library was fantastic, full of, things about Greek and Hebrew. He always preached from a Greek Bible, didn't use an English one. He was a thorough, careful, minute scholar.
Did you have chats at the time with him when you were lecturing at
I don't know that he was.
It was more when you were a student. Right. Okay.
When I was a student, I was a primary teacher, right? We had to do Daniel and Revelation. Well, he looked at this group of primary teachers, and I think he kind of threw up his hands in horror because they weren't theologians. So we had this book on Daniel, and we spent like half of the semester going through the first 3 or 4 chapters of this slowly, all the critique of Daniel and who wrote Daniel and when was it written and all that kind of stuff. We never did touch the book of Revelation. We skimmed through the last few chapters of Daniel. But I loved every minute of that class because he was such a good scholar.
Right.
But I think the most of my colleagues sitting in the room were kind of gazing out the windows.
Yeah. Did you like communicate with his wife at all during that time period?
No, a couple of times a group of us went to their place for meals. So she was just always this gracious host.
Did she ever
very gracious.
Did she ever share her views on the theological goings on? No.
No, not her interest.
Yeah. And has Estelle expressed thoughts and hurt or pain or regret or gratitude for that time period? Has she reflected on that at all?
I think mainly she's sorry for what the church did to him health-wise through this crisis. She knows better than anybody because she's a scholar herself, the same kind of scholar. And she just saw his scholarship largely untapped and undeveloped because of the opportunities he didn't have, and how much she valued that.
Mm.
When he passed away, we went to his home. He set up the garage as his study, and all his books were there. And so we had to pack them up. I think they've ended up at in the archives at Avondale.
Oh, right.
But what was interesting is there was nothing by Ellen White.
Wow. Boy, that is.
He focused on the scriptures.
Yeah.
Sola Scriptura.
Yeah. Just talking about Ellen there for a second, I tell you what, she must. I have a huge respect for her in the sense of how she stood up to the men of her day. Did you gain any inspiration from her in that regard?
No, except I've done the tour of the archives at Andrews, and they bring out her licensed credential to be an ordained minister.
Yes.
And like there it is, there it isn't, and now it's gone back into the archives.
And there's people that say that that's fake, and it's not. Oh, but she put her X. She didn't sign her name, or there's
I don't know. I couldn't get a good look at it.
Yeah, it was like whoosh. Were you born a Seventh-day Adventist?
No. We live next door to Myrtle O'Hara. Now, there's the name that older Adventists will know. Myrtle O'Hara wrote the Children's Corner in the Record.
Oh, because I thought I know that name. Yeah.
She was a strict, rigid Adventist, if ever there was one. I mean, my mother was just kind of newly married, and Myrtle would come over and say, "Show me your shopping list. Cross, all the things you don't need, and now you put these healthful things in, But that was how my mother kind of had an acquaintance with Adventism.
Wow. So how old were you when you became an Adventist?
I was baptised the same year as my mother, and I was about 11 or 12.
Did you miss the indoctrination that brought on the nightmares about your probation closing? It seems that only happens if you were heavily indoctrinated up to about the age of 7.
Isn't that incredible?
So
The other thing I find interesting is when we do our I don't know whether this is still true, but back in the day, the evangelistic series would always start off with Daniel and Revelation, and then we'd never hear about it again.
Yeah.
Once we got into the church, what a place to start.
I know.
Dead men do tell tales, remember?
Yes.
Yeah.
We'd
be breaking through archaeological sites in the Middle East. I fancy bringing people into the church via that.
I know.
It's kind of staggering, isn't it?
And then people coming into the church, it's like very difficult for them to they then suddenly opened up to this vista of like confusion and conflict and varying degrees of support for certain beliefs, and it must be confusing.
Yep.
So, tell us a little bit about when you left college and you started your degree, did your PhD. Was the college expecting you to come back?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yes. Because I had to do the year at Andrews.
That's right.
I had a wonderful year. I mean, I had seriously passed all my subjects and all that, and I got a lot out of it, especially in the seminary. Wonderful courses, wonderful professors they had there. Then I went to Harvard. So I spent 2 years on the campus at Harvard doing the coursework. Then I was writing my dissertation after that. And it was while I was writing my dissertation that I got a letter from the division. All the sponsored students got this letter, and it said, if we have any concerns about your faithfulness in the church, your support will be terminated, and you will return to us all the monies that have been given to you at an interest rate to be determined. You know, if we find any fault with you. Well, that kind of just shook me to my foundations, because about a week or maybe even less before I was to fly out to Andrews, I got a call. Well, I got a call from Jim Cox, who was the president at the time, and he just got a call from the division office. And the question that was posed to me was I a faithful Adventist? Because if I wasn't, the plug was going to be pulled.
What year was this again?
I had 83.
Okay.
So, you know, this was all the Des Ford time.
Yeah, yeah.
This was, everybody was tainted.
If you weren't a faithful Adventist, you're... So where was this coming from?
The division.
Like, who signed it?
I guess the president. Well, you mean the letter?
Yeah.
The letter that came 3 years into my program. I thought, you know, I can have to pay for this year at Andrews at an interest rate to be determined. But what really galled me was that when I was teaching at the Avondale High School, after 5 years there, I had decided I would go to Andrews and do my master's degree. So I had applied, I was accepted, I was in communication with the dean, Tom Geraghty, wonderful, wonderful man, and I was all set to go when the college asked me if I would step in and take David Stokes' place at the college. And I was told at that point that the college would send me after a time.
Right.
So 5 years later, I was ready then to embark now on a doctoral program, because I did my master's degree at Newcastle.
Yes.
But at that time, Trevor went down to the division office and they said, would I just step in and be chair? And Eric Magnuson said to me at the time, we know that, you know, you are due to be sent, but if you will stay and do this job for us, we will send you after some time. So 5 years later, I began to say I wanted to go to Andrews. So that was 10 years of service I gave above and beyond.
Yes, when you were first expecting to go as well.
Yeah, yeah. Which would have been a better career move for me to have done it when I was younger than when I was older.
Yeah.
And then to turn around and say I owed them.
I know.
I felt like Jacob and Leah and Rachel, you know. I'd done my service.
Yes.
So I wouldn't sign the letter, because I thought the very thing that they found fault with me before I left, they'll find fault with me again. So I'll be stuck with this big bill that I wasn't even employed. I was partway through my studies. So when I didn't sign, they just cut me off like that.
Really? Did they chase you for repayment and put an interest?
Never said a word. No words were ever exchanged. No explanation was ever given. Just the money was stopped.
Wow.
So
and you got no idea who oversaw that?
Well, I did write to Wally Scragg, who was the division president at the time, and I said, I'd like to talk about this situation. I'm coming to Australia, and I would. Well, he would not talk to me. He referred me to some minor official in the Treasury Department, who, of course, would have no power
Yeah.
to make any kind of decisions. So soon after that, I got word again, never from an official source, but totally unofficially, that I was not to speak in any Adventist church in Australia. So I haven't.
So you got that in writing?
No.
They called you and said you're not.
The division didn't call me, but
No, no.
somebody who had invited me to speak
Yes.
then had to call me back and say, I'm sorry, we can't
Because
have you
of
come.
because of this ruling. The edict on
Never
high, Iris Yob is not to speak in Australia, along with Des Ford and George Burnside.
Yeah, right. I mean, it's a wonderful company. It was really kind of flattering. But it was kind of shocking because it was nothing was ever said to me face to face. And this is, again, this paternalistic thing. I'd never, all these communications, when the question about me even going in the first place was raised, they didn't call me, they called Jim Cox.
Yeah.
And when this other invitation came, they didn't call me, they called the person who had made the invitation, like I had vanished. I was a little pebble left up on the sand and the tide had gone out. That's exactly what it felt
That's
like.
how you felt. Yeah. Not only how you felt, it's what happened.
But, in many ways, it's been a good thing because I feel stronger in faith, happier in my life.
Yeah.
I don't care about people constantly ready to, like living in a glass house, criticised all the time.
Maybe you'll even officially take your name off the Avondale College Church roll, and
I kind of can't do that.
has it to do with
Kind
something?
of can't do it. One day they'll do a purge of the rolls and I'll get a message.
Yeah. Well, I've really loved chatting to you, and I'm keen for you to kind of unpack anything else that you think you'd like to say. And there might even be a few questions that pop in. If there's a slight delay, if people that are watching, if you'd like to ask a question, Iris may or may not answer. But now's the time to write a question because of the delay. Sometimes we finish and I cut it off. And Iris, you're welcome to dig into the comments they've been firing away below if you want to. But yeah, is there anything that I haven't perhaps touched on that you'd like to talk about?
No, I don't think so.
Were you about to say something that I cut you off then?
It
I'm
was
aware of
interesting.
stopping your voice.
A couple of years ago, Robin Priestley
Yeah.
and Alvine Turrison and I, who used to all share the apartment together, and were great pals way back when, and had been since college. A couple of years ago, we were travelling in Germany together. Alvin and I were sitting in the front seat of the car, and Robin and Estelle were in the back seat of the car. And Alvin said, "What's been the hardest thing for you?" And Alvin, of course, became an Anglican priest after she worked at the BBC. Yeah.
Oh.
And I said, I think it was the loneliness.
Yeah.
Because the Avondale community, the Cooranbong community, was such a fabulous community, full of inspiring and wonderful people, thoughtful people, caring people, and committed. We all shared a commitment to the vision of Avondale. When you would drive along the streets and you'd recognise people by the cars they were driving.
Yes.
And suddenly you're thrown into a situation where you know nobody.
Yeah.
Like when I went to Harvard, I knew nobody in Boston. And, that's when I really did miss this sense of Adventist community. So that's to say two things. One is to praise the Avondale folk for providing such wonderful community. And the other is to say, sometimes you have to leave it to value it and to rediscover yourself.
Yeah. to the lonely women in the church now who are not even finding that solidarity in the community, what advice would you give them? Is there hope in the church? Would you say run to the hills, or would you say stay? It's changing.
Well, I can't comment on whether it's changing or not, but I suspect it's not changing. But there, as you say, there are people out there, both in the church and outside of the church. There are women's groups that can be very inspiring and wonderful to belong to. And there are groups within the church. The Association of Adventist Women was a very wonderful community for me when I first went to Andrews.
Mm.
And I think there are people in Australia that still have chapters of AAW.
And
That might be a good place to go.
Joy Butler is for women that are watching, has got a group. I think I'm right in saying this, that is for women on a Facebook group as well. If people want to contact her as well.
There are women around. There are enlightened women.
And are women more and more cautious of men? Like, what advice do you give to men that want to kind of... Like, I don't see myself as a man that wants to serve anybody, so I don't want to become a servant to women, but I don't want to become... well, I'm not. It's not about becoming. I like to see leaders rise up, men and women, theological trainees and non-theologians. I like community that has a variety of people doing a variety of things that they want to do. But what advice would you give men who are keen to kind of support women?
I would say listen, getting back to this voice thing. Listen to women, let them speak. That would be a starting point. It's like what a true democracy would be. Every voice is equal.
Yeah,
and we have so much to learn. I tell you, if I was teaching back at Avondale now in my college classes, I would teach them very differently. I'd teach them democratically. I'd do no lecturing. Because you've got to hear the voices. Let people experience, knowledge making, meaning making. That's what we need.
Yeah.
I probably wouldn't preach a sermon either for the same reason.
Yeah. When you preach, you kind of inadvertently come across as someone that is speaking with authority. It can happen. I'll just quickly read some comments. Harry Ballas has said they're going to send you the bill now that you've prompted them. There's many wonderful comments that I'd love you to read. You should read later. Just nice, supportive comments. Harry also says, Pastor Jorgensen gave me a gift of one of his books when I returned to Australia to commence my doctoral studies. He was a good friend.
Nice.
There's lots of comments. Gillian has written, Iris Yob, you are a lovely pebble. I don't know if that has some other meaning.
Jill and I were, we took some classes together when I was trying to catch my qualifications up with my job. So we did German classes together. But Jill was a good friend.
Yeah.
And the way she graduated one day, got married the same day or the next day or soon then, and went off to another country with 3 young kids in tow. I mean, courageous. Yeah. Courageous.
She is a courageous woman. And she's going to be interviewed on SDAQ&A.
Excellent.
Like SDAQ&A is ongoing. It's been going for about a year. But this Glacier View series, as part of the whole thing, when that's kind of ebbs to its organic close, she's going to have the last word.
Great.
And Rowenfeld, beautiful person, friend of mine, she has said, weeping for yet another woman. That's something that you must have said a little bit earlier. Graham Fraunfelder has said, Iris, Refreshing to hear your spiritual journey and awareness. Very beautiful. I'm sad for the tough times and mistreatment and glad for what you have found and created. In fact, I'm going to be interviewing Graham tomorrow at 2 o'clock. Tomorrow at 2 o'clock. It'll be really interesting to hear his
Yeah.
thoughts as well.
Very good.
Many other lovely comments. Nikki Carlton has written, I think leaders are all different too. A group needs a variety of leaders in different areas. Otherwise, one person burns out. We can each have something to have and to share as well. Yeah, mainly just lots of wonderful comments and words of kindness to you.
Lovely, lovely. I don't know how I find those comments.
If because you're a member of the group, you'll be tagged now. So when the interviews finish, you won't be able to see them now, I don't think. I had to set up a separate monitor so that I could see them. But yeah, afterwards, just go through and read and comment if you like, and if everyone's very respectful, mostly.
It's right. Doesn't matter. As long as they speak what's on their heart.
Yeah, Lowell Tarling, Lowell,
Oh,
if
yeah.
you're watching, I want to interview you, Lowell, don't forget.
Yes.
They don't, Lowell has said they don't take your name off church rolls. I know what he's going to say now, because it reduces the overall brag number of membership. I know this because two of my friends have tried. One hadn't been to church for 35 years and found out he was on the roll because his mum wanted his vote over a Wurrunga youth crisis or something. Wurrunga youth church issue. Yeah.
I would just say one other thing, Peter. Something from Des, another word of wisdom from Des.
Yeah.
Whenever you speak heresy because you can never say it all.
Oh.
That you've left out some important things, and I feel that that's the case here, and Des was exactly right, as always.
Hey, the good thing about social media is that you can chat below if you think of something, and you can also come back anytime as well. I'm going to keep the SDA Q&A going as long as I can. Sometimes I get a bit frustrated, but we're coming up to the GC 2020 elections, and I think finally when Ted has become president, people will go, oh, okay, we do need to do something now. when the compliance document has more teeth. Yeah. But I do lots of other things as well. I don't spend my time pondering all things Adventist.
Yeah, there's a big, wonderful world
It's a
out
big,
there.
wonderful world, and I'm certainly enjoying it and immersing myself in it, and I can tell that you do too, and you've really brought a wonderful energy and bunch of insights and information to this discussion, and I really appreciate it, Iris.
No, you're very welcome. I didn't know what to expect, but you said you were a good interviewer, and that proved to be quite true.
Oh, thank you very much. Thank you. I'm trying. I'm learning. Life for me is just really about trying to become a better person. See, and every day there's something new to learn. Well, thank you, Iris, and until next time, have a wonderful sleep tonight and a beautiful day tomorrow. And can you just tell us what's on the horizon for you before as the last word?
Well, I'm just writing chapter 8 of a book, nothing to do with what we've been talking about, but it's a history of the university I've been connected with for the last 20 odd years. Walden University, it's online university with a mission for social change. And I've talked about the history of this university, especially as it's a for-profit university, and how the for-profit and the social change kind of work together, sometimes against each other, sometimes for each other. But it was a university founded by some wonderful visionary people, and the vision hasn't died. So this year is the 50th anniversary of the university, So it was a chance for me to write it. And of course, I was with the university for half of its history.
Yeah.
And it's had a lot of changes, a lot of change of personnel. So I'm one of the few legacy faculty who can really write from memory in many cases.
Wow.
Anyway, so I'm finishing off that. That's my next big project.
That's the project.
Yeah.
Thank you, Iris. Until we meet again, we appreciate you being on SDA Q&A.
Thanks very much, Peter. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Well, that was fantastic. We're back in 2025 now, everybody. And I was taking notes there, and so many things I wanted to comment on. And hopefully Iris gets to watch this back. And Iris, if you ever are, please come on the show again. It doesn't matter if it's coinciding with this anniversary re-release. I would just love to chat with you. It was such an inspirational, eye-opening interview. And I just want to thank Dr. Iris Yob for engaging with me 5 years ago. And that topic today feels as relevant and fresh as ever. Ted Wilson did get in, and we're on the eve of him, I believe, about to get in again. And it doesn't appear to be a church that is open to change, and those who can bring about change seem to be dropping the ball. But that's a whole other story. Tomorrow, our guest gospel presenter is Jennifer Colburn, and that is Thursday, 6 p.m. Pacific time, and New South Wales, Australia, 11 o'clock Friday. We're about to head into book club right now. So I've put the Zoom link in the comments, both here on YouTube and here on Facebook. And we'd love you to come and join us. Give me a few minutes to save this particular interview. I don't want to lose it. Keep it safe for posterity. And by the way, those of you that maybe are enjoying the comments and you would like to visit the comments of 2020 on the Facebook group, do so before Facebook deletes these incredible interviews. What's sad is that, I've saved the files, of course. The interviews are going to be here on YouTube to watch, but there are so many incredible comments on those live Facebook conversations that are going to be gone. So if you ever commented on those, you would like to educate yourself in some really interesting engagement, please go back and join SDA Q&A, the Facebook group, and then go back and watch and read. Thank you, everyone. Look forward to seeing you all tomorrow. And those of you that are still awake in the United States, come and join us in about 15 minutes for book club, hosted by Rochelle Anonymous, as we read Whitewashed by Sydney Cleveland. Woo, mind blown. See you, everybody. You guys are awesome.